Sure.
Long time no see, Aaron.
Hey, Abby.
Just came back to the reality. How come your screen enlarged itself? They go large, suddenly pop up to my computer. I'm like, what? Did you have control to my PC?
After 3.
On 3.
After 3.
1, 2, 3.
Happy
World
Product
Day!
Day!
I like that one. There was more hands in that one.
Is it only my screen? I see nothing.
It's because it goes into the second screen that Amanda is sharing. So when you're actually looking at the streaming on YouTube, you'll see the slides and the video.
Oh, okay. So we should look at YouTube instead. Am I correct?
It's all right.
I
We are
like
going to
to-
share. I'm going to share
I
my
like to
screen
enjoy
anyway.
the enjoyment. Like, oh my god, I don't know how many years.
Yes. Sure. And you need to allow me to, so take in the list of participants, the list where you don't see my video, but you see only my picture. So, and you allow me to share my screen so I can share my iPad, that would be great. No, yeah, yes, please. For now, I'm not, yes, I can. Fantastic. So let me know when you see my screen. All right. So thank you very much for the introduction, Amanda, and thank you very much for having me. So let me introduce myself. I'm Clark Chahine. I'm the head of product at a company called Kpler, and I will tell you a bit more about it in a minute. I've been contacted, I think it was a bit less than a month ago, by Amanda and someone else to see if I would join you to share some of my experience as a B2B product manager. And so to start the talk, I'd like just to tell you a couple of things about me. I'm 34 years old. I'm actually not product manager by background because there is no actually diploma for product management. I think you all agree there that you've never started your career as a product manager. I started my career as a geologist. So I am one of those who studied geology, go figure, right? But it's actually quite an interesting topic because it teaches you a lot of the creativity and the visualization that you need to have in your head of what's happening underground. And I started then my career like this. So you see my screen, and I'm going to do something I've never done before, which is I'm going to build a story with you guys. And I'd like it to be very interactive. So please don't hesitate to shout and mute. I'll just put a comment there. And then we'll build a story, and I'll tell you more about some of my chronicles and then events that happened that led me to learn things about product management. So the first things I'd like to tell you is more about just, okay, how did I came to be where I am today? Right? So back in 2010, I started in a company called Schlumberger, right? So we often call it SLB. And in SLB, I started at the bottom of the chain. I was a geologist, and actually what I was doing was very simple. I was doing what we used to call back then support. So I was answering the phone, training people into how to use software, and basically guiding them through the process of support. Today, this part of this job is under the customer success type of roles, only part of it. I didn't do account management to it and so forth. It evolved over the last decade. But I was doing mostly support, training, and consulting by then. After a while, I moved to do something a bit different, but quite linked around the sales. I was what we used to call a technical sales and what today we call a product specialist. So I was basically taking basically the path of understanding the cycle of the product, right? How the product is built and so forth. And actually, that reminds me that when you think about it, when you look at the life cycle of a product from, let's say, here is the ideation, then you have the creation and design, CD, then you have the development, then you have the deployment, then you have the marketing, then you have the sales, and then you have the support. And then actually it goes all the way back and so forth, right? So my career, actually, I started there and I went backward. Right? And it was one of my biggest learning, because after sales, what did I do? Well, guess, I did marketing. And I did marketing for a while for various products at a global scale in Schlumberger. So most people don't know about Schlumberger, and I'm pretty sure you don't know about Schlumberger. But I can tell you, it's a company that without it, you wouldn't actually be able to put gas oil in your car or gas in your oven and so forth, because it's the leading company for oil and gas services and hydrocarbon services, basically. And they had a department, and they have still a big digital department, which is the software department. And I was basically part of this department. So, and that's often what happens in B2B. You are part of this world of what I call the shadows. No one knows what you do. Your own mother won't understand what you do, right? When you try to explain them, generally your friends say, "What again?" And I'm pretty sure we all had this experience where people don't actually know that, okay, B2B exists in certain part of the world of the business exists, right? And that's something I've learned very early on. Stop trying to explain to people what I do. Just tell them I'm working into an environment and into a division of work that is technology, and I'm helping building technology. Like that, this is simple. Then after marketing, I realized that I wanted to go even further down the line, because I was getting frustrated that the things I wanted to be done in the product were not done and things like that. And in a large corporation, basically what happens when you complain a lot, they end up giving you the job. So they gave me the job of a product manager, and then of head of product, where I was leading all the products for subsurface. So basically, I was managing all the products that allow oil and gas company to search, find an oil and gas in the subsurface. So there is a lot of softwares, there is a lot of users, and it makes hell a lot of money, right? Just to give you an order of magnitude, I was by that time, I spent 10 years in Schlumberger, right? And by the end of my 10 years, I was managing roughly 30 to 32, depends on the time. I started at 17, and then 30, I finished at 32 product managers and trainers and business developers that were part of the team. Not all in direct report, I had multiple levels. And then we were basically leading a team of 150 to 200 developers, depending also on the years. So you could imagine that's quite big. That's equivalent of more than $500 million in revenue every year, recurring. That's more than 55,000 users. For B2C customer world, product managers say, oh, that's nothing, that's not too much users. But the impact of the work you do on those users have impacts of millions, sometimes billions of dollars impact. So that's basically what I've done in Schlumberger. And I've learned across these years that actually product management and managing a product is not only about the day-to-day agile methodology and just the project type of management. It has to have a business component. It has to have a design component and a technology understanding and so forth, right? Then a year ago, I basically moved. I decided that, there's things that I've learned in Schlumberger that I've been very grateful, right? Because it teaches you the ways to work. Now, when you have so much money, so many resources, you don't learn how to develop a product in the most linear fashion. And you are also generally very slow. So one thing I've decided back then is, first of all, you don't want to stay in oil and gas per se. Second of all, I wanted to take what my learnings and apply it into a smaller company, a startup that is moving to scale up. So to see how I can learn to be more lean and more thoughtful as well into how to basically develop a product and grow it. Because I touch this, and I'm going to touch that there, into product that had various ages. And that's a critical thing that we never talk about enough. You do not manage a product that is 30 years old the same way you manage a product that is 5 years old. And that's basically the core of my learnings, and I'm going to share with you today. So I joined a company called Kpler. It's a wonderful company because what the company does is also extremely important, but no one knows about. We track commodities around the world, so to facilitate the global trades, so to help traders and financial players and companies that are basically trading those commodities to have more sustainable and efficient way of trading. So we track all of that live, real time, 24/7. And from 30 people managing, I'm down to a bit less than 10. Amazing people. Actually, some of them are also connected today. Hi there. And in here, what do? I manage the product team, right? And basically guide them as much as possible and empower them to do the work. I lead the design of the company. So that basically goes with the branding of the company, the interface, the user experience. It's actually not just design in the sense of how it looks, it's how it feels, how people experience it. And then I also lead the marketing efforts of the company. We are a company of 140 people across the world. Some are actually based in Singapore and in Dubai and Paris and in London and in Houston and New York. I mean, it's everywhere. Right? And in here, I'm learning more how to be lean and so forth. In parallel of that, a couple of years ago, I've started as well to basically help product managers around the world. And I basically mentor product managers as part of a group that I joined a year ago almost, called the French CPOs. This group is the group of the top chief product officers in the French tech. It's a small network, but we do a lot of help to coach other product managers, help them grow, so forth. And I'm also part of other groups for basically startup like Techstars that allow me to mentor startup and basically learn with them what it takes to build product and so forth. So in that sense, I've had the chance, and I'm very lucky, and I've had the chance to touch basically at many different things in the product lifecycle as a job, right? But more importantly, I've seen product of various age and various maturity. And this is probably the biggest learning that I'm going to share with you today in those chronicles, because I'm going to tell you a story for each period of the life of product, and basically make sure that you see a bit of my learnings, some of my mistakes, and also some of the things I've successfully done, because I was guided by very smart people around me who knew about product management, but who knew also about business. Because let's not forget it, B2B is business to business. So you are selling to a different kind of users. You are selling generally, and you are building a product to be sold to a smaller amount of people, a smaller community, which means that you need to be very much more aware of what they do, and you need to be able to talk to them, because you do not have necessarily always the data to back it up, and so forth. But before going into that, I would like just to reflect on a couple of things, right? So if I take what I basically explained, and I redrew basically the key pillars of what I've learned over my career, which is design, tech, and business, basically, which is also actually something that the product created back in 2010, 11. Back then, it's this Venn diagram that everybody knows. Everybody thinks and says that a good product manager is in the middle. And that's wrong. I'm going to be straight. The reality is that you are never in the middle. It's very rare. And one of the things I've learned is that actually, based on your experience, you generally tend to be into one of those sections. So part of my experience was that I've learned that my biggest strength is actually in this area, which is in between design and product. And sometimes, and I say sometimes, I'm actually having to switch with this side of the Venn diagram, which is the tech and the business. Now, why do I say that? It's because actually very often people think that they need to try to master the three of them. Well, what I'm going to show you with my experience there is that actually you don't need to. You need to adapt your skills based on to the product and the time of the product, the time of development, the age of the product, the maturity of the product you are in, right? So let's move this a minute and park it here, right? And I'm going to use that and draw you a timeline of, let's say, the age of a product, the maturity of a product. So let's start first by giving you an order of magnitude, right? So we have the product that is 0 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15, 20, and then 25 plus, okay? Basically, those are the years. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take you in the journey of this, and I'm gonna put back the focus level that each product at each stage of its maturity needs based on to everything I've seen in all the product, either I manage or I've seen people building over the years, right? Either it's a focus on design or technology and or in business, right? So let's draw the timeline. So this is the timeline, right? Sorry, it's not perfectly straight, I'm trying my best. So let's start with, actually, I'm not gonna start from the beginning. I'm gonna start from the end. Because my story started not by managing a product that was very young and to the infancy. I was in a large corporation in Schlumberger, and I was managing two of the biggest products of Schlumberger in software. One of them was 30 years old, and the second one, when I started to manage it, was 15 years old. Right? So I basically started my journey somewhere here and somewhere here, right? Now, what did I learn in that part of the world, in that part of the timeline of a product? First of all, let's talk about the 30 years old product. In business to business, it's very often that you have those kind of products. They are old, they are quite clunky, not clunky, they are solid, they are robust. Most of the time people say, oh, I hate using it. I don't want to use it. You know, those are the product that everybody hates, but they end up using it anyway because they have no other choice. Why? Because those products are extremely well integrated. Those products have got the maturity and have its richness. And generally what happens, large corporations are going to tend to take those integrated products even if they are not that great. An example, the product I had was called Geoframe and Kpler. Kpler was 15 years old and Geoframe was 30 years old. Geoframe was the dad of Kpler on its concept base, right? But then when I talked to the sales guys, they were using C4C or Salesforce, and all the people who uses ETRM knows, for example, that those tools are not very much liked, but they are useful because they are matured. And in this case, what did I learn? I've learned that when you have a discussion with the customer, right, you are actually in the place where the most important is not the features anymore, is not the technology anymore. When you are reaching 20 years old, it's the business. You have a business discussion with your customer, right? And in this case, if we say that this is just like level of interest, okay? If I draw the piece for a product, I'm gonna just do something a bit clear here. I'm gonna put it even longer. So when you're on the end phase, basically you are sunsetting the product, right? So you are basically focusing more onto the business side of things at that level. Business is blue, right? Design is pink, is green. And in here, you can't do much about the design. You've done quite a bit, and you can just improve, but you really stop working on the design. The technology is a bit different because you are basically having a product that is so mature that you need to start to migrate your users from one solution to another, because the technology are improving so fast that basically keeping the product sustained is becoming more and more costly. All right. So what did I learn there? I learned that I had to be what I call the politician. Basically, every customer that was to come to me for one of those products and asking me for features or things, I was basically telling them no. So this is where you learn to say no. And I'm going to tell you this anecdote. We used to have those steering committees for one of those products where you had 15 customers from one company that were spending more than $10 million every year. And they were coming with a list of 500 features every year, and they were counting the amount of features you would deliver for them, because obviously they spend $20 million with you. They want return. And my team and I were sitting there, and to almost every single one of them, I told them no, straight in the face. First learning, never do that. Because when you tell them no, and you don't tell them why, it pisses them off. But that was back in 2016, 17. Trust me, I was 30 years old. You learn the lesson. So you learn to know how to say no and explain them why. And this is why being able to explain the technology is quite important, right? Because you are going to have to tell them, like, to do what you want, right? You need to invest a lot of technology, but actually the return is not going to be great, right? So to do that, basically discussion, I've learned something. So this part, right, I'm going to draw a line here, and I'm going to call it basically the sunsetting or politician part, right? And what happened is that you basically work into a very simple manner. What I've learned there is I basically had to be very transparent to my customer. So one of my learning here is that I've basically taken a very simple approach of showing them a very simple chart where I was explaining them that this is the return, right? And this is the investment, right? Or the complexity, if you prefer. And you have a line there. That's the first thing, by the way, I taught my team when I came in Kpler, is this vision, where you say, well, if I want a certain feature or a certain workflow, well, does the user really need it? Well, you say, okay, the impact is that high and the complexity is not that big, right? So maybe do it. And then maybe one of them is actually, okay, impact is high, but complexity is very high, right? So what you learn in that case, you learn that when you do that with your customer, right, and your users, they start to understand that actually the things you need to avoid, there is certain zone you need to avoid. You need to avoid this zone, right? So this zone is the no-go zone. Why? Because it's extremely complex and very little return. And when you have a product that is 20 years old, you generally know that's going to be where you are, right? Because the cost of putting something or changing something is very high when the architecture is very high. When you go further down the line of the age, you'll see that actually you are more in that science that is more the organic growth of your product, okay? And then younger you are, younger you seek a product that basically are more in that sense. So your product will basically do something like this. It's going to start like this, then go, then expand in each direction, and then go back up. And that's 20 years old, right? That's 20 years old of product. So in this case, what do you need? You need to have an extremely high business sense, right? So if I were to put in that chart where as a product manager, the product managers I were managing had as a skills, they were mostly skills into that zone of business, right? And some were more technical because they needed to do something. But it's mostly this one, right? So that's at 20 years there. Okay. So 20, 30 years, you basically, actually, I can even put them there. So that's even 15 years, right? So depending on to the edge of the product, you're not going to have to use the same skills. So there's no point trying to be in the middle when they don't need you in the middle. The product doesn't need you in the middle, right? Now what happened, right? So I'm back there. I'm managing a product that is 15 years old, and sorry, I'm managing a product that is 15 years old, and basically you have different challenges. So what happened then is you have a very large amount of users, right? And those amount of users, basically they've been using the product for the same way, like for a long time. So what needs to happen there is a change of experience, because experience is change. You've seen it. If I take, for example, Microsoft, right? Microsoft did it very well with Office. They started in the 70s, 80s, you know, with Excel, actually. The concept was so good that the concept still remains today and is actually used as well. But they've changed the experience of the product, Word and Excel and the rest, using the ribbon at some point in the 2000s, years 2000s, changing to visual graphics. So here the focus is a bit different. The focus is more on design, where basically arriving that stage, basically you'll have a big push on design, right? Smaller push on the technology, but actually what often happens is at the same time you do that, you have a dent here, and then you also have a roughly stable, a bit less on the business. Why? Because this is where you start to have a very rich product, where you have a lot of features, right? And you need to think of how you package it differently. So that phase I called the mutation, basically. So if I were if I were to draw this line again, right? This phase. So this is the politician, and this is the mutation. So what did I learn there? I learned that basically, when you look at the history of a product, right, and you say that this is 100% of your usage, right? When you look at the history of a product, and I'm going to draw it very simply, you have basically, when you start the product and it's 0 year old up to that time, the usage, generally, the amount of usage of your platform, because you have an amount of features that grows. This is the number of features. The adoption of a product will look like this. And you are going to end up having just 5% of the product that is actually used. Richer is your product, less likely you have users to actually have more diversified users, and less likely you have actually the amount of users to know your product as a whole and the rest. So what did I learn? I learned that in this case, you can either, and I'll do it in green in this case, in green, you can either, if you are there or there, say, I'm going to change the experience and I'm going to reboost my usage, right? Or you can also say, I'm going to completely change my product and start a new product. So take some of those concepts, migrate them, and start a new product, right, with the same amount of users, but in parallel. Okay. So in this case, there is no best practice. You need to see how the market reacts, what the market needs, and so forth. And this is why you need some sense of business, because design and redesigning the experience is one thing. Thinking about the packaging of your product is something else. And this is why I say You know, you need to play around all your skills and strengths. So if I were to come back to here, 15 years old, we are here, right? So going backward, right? I have, I'm going that way, so design, right? And sometimes I go that way like that as well. So I'm in this area here, and that's 10 years in general, okay? Did you see, I still didn't touch the middle here. I still didn't arrive there. I've turned around, I focused, and I had to learn to focus my attention into other skills and acquire other skills of discussion with customers, of packaging, of sales, of marketing, to actually achieve the growth of the product. Now, this kind of product exists everywhere. Those products are the products that have the best concepts. One thing I've also learned, starting my career by managing old product, is that when you're in this mutation phase and you're trying to convince your customer to use the product differently, if you're trying to change the feature or the experience, it might be fine. But if you try to change the principle of the product, a concept, right, it's a bit more challenging. One thing I've learned is that great product never dies. The first time I said that to my brother, and he looked at me and said, I disagree. And I said to him, you disagree because you think of a product as a amount of features, but the product is beyond that. The product is based on two principles and concepts. If the concepts or principle, sometimes some also call it the distinctives, right, of the product, are right, then they are never going to die. The concept is going to be moving from one product to another. And as much as you're actually diversifying and mutating your product, right, the concept remains. The concept I had in Schlumberger was integration and data visualization, right? Those were the two tools that we are building. We are building an integration of workflows, so of an outcome-based type of approach. And we were visualizing in a stunningly way in 3D and actually in 4 dimension, you know, the subsurface, which was the most compelling for our users. Right? I often say as well that the best product in the world are Legos. Do you know why? Because they have the simplest concept. I have a brick and I can put a brick on top of another. And by all means, when I do so, I create something and I can tell a story. The concept is the most simple. I'm putting a brick against on top of each other, or weirdly enough, I'm building something. Right? That's the best product in the world. The concept is right, and everybody tried to copy it, successfully or not, right? And actually, most of the houses are built like this. So it's actually not a concept that they created, but they thought, okay, actually, it can unlock something. The second thing I've learned there, so here I've learned that concepts, right, or principles are the most important things of the product. There is no point having an attachment to an interface. There is no point having an attachment to the product itself, the features, because frankly, that's not what the product is about and why we've built the product in the first place. And that was one of my biggest learning. The second learning based on this is that the best product, so a great product never dies because of their concept never dies. The best product are product that tells a story. Product that allows the user to tell a story. Why? Because when they do, they are talking not about how they've done things and not how they've actually managed to develop, like to do something with the tool. They are talking about why they've made the decision and why they've made those changes. And this is the next step. And I've learned that by managing products that were very old. And I'm very grateful because I've learned to actually start by the end. One of the product called GeoFrame that was 30 years old, I had to sunset it. In Schlumberger, we used to call it retirement. You know how it looks? It's very simple. I have one guy doing for 2 years legal discussions and moving people from one platform to another. And after that, we sign off. The head of technology, the CTO sign off the retirement, and we remove it from our price book and support and so forth. We keep the code. It's stored and archived somewhere in our technology team, but the product is not existing anymore. And that's a very interesting experience to try to retire a product, because you have to tell your users who seems to like the product that actually this product is not good enough anymore for them when they are very happy with it. So this is why the business side is very important. Now, let's go back even further into the age of a product. And here I'm going to jump actually with the experience I have currently at Kpler. My product is not 10 years old, is 5 years old, 6 years old, right? So I'm going to go up to I'm going to do there is two zones that actually happen that are often quite close, right? So those two zones here are actually very similar in the sense that they are closing, and sometimes the two happens at the same time. The first one on the rest is diversification. Right. So diversification, and I'm going to explain why, is a stage where any product needs to happen, right? Because you've started to reach out the max of the user, and especially in B2B, because you are in niche product, you are starting to maybe not max out, but you are becoming if you are very successful, you are becoming the standard, right? So you start to need to think of how I'm going to improve and increase the concept or add a new concept to it, okay? And I'm going to draw a bit the charts in a minute. And then this is also why a lot of the product that you see that are 5 to 10 years old are being sold, right? Because the concept has matured enough, right? And what happened is, in this case, the business actually is quite high, right? The tech actually is higher as well, because you need to incorporate more things. And the design actually do a small bump, and then here you have a bigger part, and I'm going to draw it in a minute, right? In that case, it's where you start to learn to ask yourself the question of, okay, what's next? A product has been successful on its base concepts and principle. Where do you take the product next? Today, at Kpler, we are in between the phase 5 and 2. The phase 5, by the way, I call it the phase of integration and expansion. And I'm going to draw the line so you know what happened then. Oops, sorry. What happened then is that you have a bit more design, because you have to basically, and I explained why earlier you didn't have it so much in B2B. You have quite a lot of tech, right? But a bit less. And then you have a bit less of business per se, but before that, it's where you start the company, right? So what happened then is you basically need to incorporate and integrate more with the rest of the ecosystem. So let's go back to the merge, and I'm going to treat them together, because it's very difficult to, especially nowadays, to actually distinguish both. It happens so fast, the movement in between both. When you start a product in B2B, you need to be a market fit, right? So this part is the quick wins, right? Wins, sorry. So remember this chart? This is when you start the product, right? This is when you are 5 years old, right? So this is 0, 5, 10, 10, 15, 20, okay? So here, what am I learning today, and my teams are learning with me as well with those products, is you have to be cautious of two things. it's parallel tracks, basically. You have to make sure that in one track, you expand and basically you expand your offer based on the concept, right? So based on the concept you have been using, right? You sustain the product and grow it, basically what I often call organic growth, right? But then what happens, you need to start to look also of what would happen if I do not take care of other things, especially in the tech world. I will call it, for a better word, the technical debt that will put my product at risk. And this is what I often mention as the events that basically would break your expansion. And those are the at-risk development. What very often happens in product teams is that they are so focused on delivering features that they forgot that the developers and the technology has evolved and need updating, and they have a technical debt because they went so fast. And this is where I've learned something else as well, to listen to the need of my developers. It's not actually a phase where you have to just give a list of features to your developers. It's a phase where you need to make sure that your engineers and your product managers are in sync into understanding that if we do not solve some of the technical problems that you might have, they are not really problems because the product works, but if we do not scale it, you can't scale the product and the product is going to fail, right? And this is a very tricky part of the growth, right? Where it's a young product, 5 years is not old, but it's not new anymore. It's not fancy, you know, users or companies and people who are using it. It's like, okay, it's reliable. It becomes to be reliable. But if you don't do it, right, you are risking to actually lose your users. So if you look at this, right, this chart, if I don't actually either do basically a break, I'm going to draw it on blue, a break here and saying, okay, wait a minute here, right? I'm going to actually stop developing features and focus onto the technical debt and the engineering work necessary. You won't be able then to expand later and regrow over time. You are going to get stuck. And this is a very challenging place. Then you have the other part, and this is where product managers very often forget that they are not just designers or business managers. They are people who needs to understand what the market needs and needs to see and evaluate the future of the market. Right? Why? Because this is where you need to basically diversify and create new offering, right? And this offering, right, they can use those concepts or they can bring new concept as well. Okay, new principle. So the challenge in that place is really to be lean into your development, listen to your engineers, right? Listen to your teams that tells you, wait a minute, here we are reaching a point. We have a lot of users, right? You don't want to lose them, but you want to win more. And this is the challenging part of things. Because when you start, so if I start back on the quick wins, and here actually, it was not in Kpler I've learned it. I've learned that in Schlumberger because we started new product before I left. It's a very different game. You need to search the business fit. You are focused onto a business fit, a need that is so small that what's important is the technology you're going to use, not really the design in B2B. The design in B2B is secondary in the first couple of years of your product. You need to prove that your product works. If it's ugly, it's okay. Now, obviously, there is more trend saying, no, it's not. But the reality is that if your product works in B2B, it's going to sell. As simple as this, right? You have to prove it works. This is why the design is not so important, but in the integration phase, what happens is that you spend a lot of time redesigning your offering and then integrating with the rest of the ecosystem. Because if you do not integrate your offer with anyone else in the ecosystem, right, you cannot grow. And that's basically some of the learnings that I had at that stage of when you move here, you need to basically create the new concepts, right? Listen, right? You listen all the time, right? You often listen to the user. But what I've learned is that this time around, you need to listen to your tech team. You need to be aware of what they need. Because without you realizing it, what they need will actually help you in the long run grow faster. It's an investment that is worth having and that you are necessary to be done because you've accumulated technical debt that is too heavy. Right? The other things you learn here is that in the integration part and in the expansion part, design is important, but it's not the design of how a product look. Is how you make a workflow more efficient. And let me draw a bit what it means. You can, so I work in a world where I work with traders. Traders have a very, very short attention span, and they basically want to have the fastest information. They want to have an information extremely fast, right? That means that basically, if you tell them that doing a workflow from A to B take them, let's say 5 minutes, it's way too long. So working on the design is not working onto how the tool will look, is working into making sure you can reduce this time incrementally so it become 1 minute or few seconds, right? This is also what you learn. You learn that it's not actually the feature that is important, it's the outcome. Is understanding what is the outcome you want. So the outcome right here is B. And then in B2B is how fast can I get B from A or from C? How can I get B, basically? So this is where, when we talk, and you often talk, we want outcome-based roadmap and things like that. Most people think it's, fluff. No, it's not. It's building a roadmap or building a tool based on outcome means that you are going to focus on to getting the experience. So the user's outcome is what matters. And this is what I've learned in Kpler is you have to focus and you have to make very hard decisions. Why? First of all, money, you don't have it as much. I don't have $20 million every year to spend in product development. So I have to very, very carefully with the team decide what we do. And it's not actually, frankly, in my team, it's not me anymore who actually tells them no and the rest. The product managers in this team, actually they are online, Gaspar and Shruti, actually are entitled and are responsible. It's their duty to do this very hard decision because they've analyzed what their users need as an outcome. So when very often you hear people say, I have difficulty to communicate an outcome-based roadmap to my managers and the co-founders of the company and so forth, very often they don't focus onto the outcome for an external point of view. They focus on the outcome of the company. If you focus the outcome of your experience and your roadmap onto what the users is going to achieve and how you are going to translate it into a dollar value for you, because frankly in B2B it's not the amount of people who are going to use it, it's the dollar value that is the most important, right? It's how much you are going to get as money. It's quite important. So if I go back here, I basically moved my line to moving actually from a bit more tech, right here. Then at some point, somewhere here, right, actually, you see that, I think it's this point, is 7 years, right? You are actually back here in the middle, and it's the only time, you will be there. Why? Because it's a balance between managing the experience of a users, managing the technical debt, and making sure that when you package your product, you do it well. And it's in the only time. Then when you move towards the early win, you actually go back to this world here, and sometimes you go back here. So actually, if I were to draw it like this, you, from the start, you do something very, very much like here, there, then there, and then you go back here. So it's a zigzag in between the three buckets, and you always, actually, your starting point is your end point in a B2B product, right? And what very often people don't realize that actually all of that needs to happen. So it's not the product. So you need to, when you hire and you build a team of product manager, you should not think, okay, how does this score compare to design, tech, and business? No, you need to think, what does my product need? Where is it in this cycle? And then I'm going to hire and I'm going to build a team to answer the need of the product, and not the ideal product manager. Very often I hear CPOs, head of products, that are trying to find the unicorn that knows to do everything. The reality is that your product doesn't necessarily need that. Your product needs a specific type of product management based onto the time or the maturity of the product. Now I'm going to put a caveat on this, right? So let's take this chart. I'm going to take it all. Right. There we go. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move it here, right? Let's smile. Let's laugh a bit, right? And I'm going to take away. I'm going to actually move every one of those. Oops, sorry. I'm going to take away this. Yes, I'm just going to move them a bit apart so I can draw you a couple of things. So 0, 5, 10, 20, no, 15, 20, and 25. Okay, it's 25. All right, so if I were to do that, clean a bit, okay. This chart with the timeline of that timeline that you see up there, right, was very valid between 2010 and 2020, right? What happened is that as technology grow, right, you see another effect, you see another thing happening in the world of product. This timeline is shrinking, right? The maturity of your product, basically, the product comes to maturity way faster nowadays, and is going to carry on growing way faster. And the lifespan of a product, and this is where I told you, you need to start to predict the future, right, is going to basically shrink. So here we are in the 2010s, right? Here we are in the 2020s. And here I can tell you, and I'm happy to come back in 10 years, right, to actually verify if my prediction is right, that actually the time to actually do all of this in a product in B2B is going to shrink more and more. The reason is very simple. Most of the key concepts have been already built into products that are older for the B2B world, okay? Creating new concepts that are going to span for years and years is going to be very, very difficult. And what people wanted then is what I call the integration, right? Now they want more and more product that does the job well for some of their key workflows, right? But connects extremely well in between them. They want interconnectivity, right? What is happening nowadays is actually more and more, and you see it mostly because you have the rise of mobility, of new technologies around more segmented type of things. People are wanting solutions and product that does very well something very quick, right, and move on. We call them the apps, and you have them on your phone, right? And with time, you're going to see that large corporations are going to still invest in integration, but actually the segmentation of the product in B2B are going to be greater and greater, and they're going to be more niche and niche. And what's going to happen is that big corporations, and it's already started, are starting to buy basically those ecosystem of product there, and just making sure they are well connected there. But it's not like one experience in all. It's just, it does the job well for one task. Why? Because we are becoming more and more impatient, and integration is not necessarily the most important thing. Experience is starting to be a bit more important, and how fast you can get the result. The pace of delivering a product, the pace of actually delivering any solution to our users are changing. And this evolution of this chart is going to change. And this is why also the evolution of that is going to change. The type of product managers we need for here is going to be a bit different, right? We are going to have not product managers that are very good at one thing or not. We are going to have product managers, and you know what? I'm going to draw. I'm going to redraw it properly, because like that you'll see the difference. So this and this and this. Okay. So remember, these design, tech, right? Rather than having product managers that are there or there, right? What they're going to ask, and what we need as a community to make sure, is that our product managers are actually not aligned in the middle, right? This is not of my interest, because the team needs to be there. A team of product managers needs to be there, but they always have at least one, those two type of things, right? They always have one of those, right? Which is basically more in the middle, but always sharing multiple skills. Multi-skilling is very important, right? Now, as much as I love my community, I can tell you, when I interview product managers, they say, yeah, I'm in the middle, or I'm in both. The reality is that they are never. They are always, especially younger they get, right? They are always into one of those buckets, right? And the goal is to make sure that you build a team that is in the middle. This middle part is the team. And to be able to respond to this, you need to have a very strong, balanced team. One exercise we've learned, and we are doing on a regular basis now in Kpler, is all the product managers and myself included, we met, right? And for a couple of hours, we actually evaluate ourselves of where we are in that chart, each individually, and then the average is the team. That helps us make sure that we understand where is our weakness, so to respond to the need of our product. Right? So what did I learn, right? I've learned, and I'm going to put the learnings here. I've learned that concepts, right, are immortals. When they are great concepts, they are immortals. I've learned that the best product help you tell a story. I've also learned that you need to learn to say no, right? You need to. It's going to be more like the very diplomatic no. Is very important. I've learned to listen to my engineers. And finally, I've learned that I will never stop learning. And I will always have to adapt myself and move across the various basically part of the skills that you need, you know, and learning and questioning yourself about your capabilities is extremely important, right? And finally, but not least, I've learned that actually you do not need a product. The product needs you, so you need to fit the product needs, So your skills need to fit product needs. Now, I'd like to finish by just changing the title of my talk. Those are not the chronicles of our B2B product managers. Those are the learnings from the chronicles of a B2B product manager. There we go. I'm done.
Wow.
Questions, feedback, anything.
That's really awesome. Thanks, Clark, for the amazing talk. I seen some question popping up from our YouTube video. So
I'm not on YouTube, but
Nicola. So he asks, what are the key early indicators to suggest the product works and that it clearly has a market need? I ask because analytics logs we get are absolute data or information. So how would you make it relative? How do you benchmark it?
So the difference with a B2C product in B2B is that you have to talk to your customers. You have to talk to your users. Because your users base is so small that you have no other choice than to actually talk to them. And what you're going to see in the analytics, and we've had this discussion in Kpler many times, is that you're going to see a bias because you do not have a mass, a critical mass. You have like thousands of users, and you look at the analytics and they all do the same thing, but they do it the way you designed it. Right? You don't have like 1 million users that you actually see if there is a problem. Because the amount of people is so small, the analytics, as you said, is works, but it doesn't give you the full information because it's biased. So what you need to do is go back and understand, okay, what is my bias in this analytics? And it's generally the bias of the either the data you are providing or the experience you are providing and so forth. And talk to your users. And talk to the users and as many as you have. If as a product manager in B2B, you do not talk to a user at least once or twice a week, there is a problem. And again, once and twice a week is not enough. By the way, users don't always, the users are not always outside customers, another company. Often also in B2B, especially in large corporations, I think Amanda, it's your case in Walt Disney, your users are actually Walt Disney people, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are actually people in the same company. And so you need to talk to them. You basically need to ensure that you have this continuous discussion. One of the things we've done in Kpler that works well is that we've built a group or user group that we call the advisory program that basically is a specific amount of people and that knows basically well our product and use it. And we have regular calls with them. And every time we have something new and want to try it, we benchmark it against that. Right? You need to have those trusted advisors. If you don't, and you only focus on the analytics, you're not going to get it relatively. It's not, you're not going to get actually the right feedback. It's a very different world, B2B, because the amount of users you have is way smaller.
I see.
Any other question? Any other feedback? Hey, don't hesitate to unmute yourself.
Sui here. I think your presentation is really fascinating. I mean, from the style, like the presentation mode where you are just drawing on the board and it's very engaging, and also the content where you are sharing, like, I think because you have different experience from your previous company as well as your current, kind of like I call it startup because it's a very famous one. I actually know it. And also you shared the future vision of from 2010 to 2020 and 2030, like how the product lifetime will shrink. So my question would be like, how do you see like for 2030 in terms of building an ecosystem, how everything is interoperable? Like, what do you see? Like, is there any sign from the industry or even from the consumer side? Anything that you have seen or something you have in mind?
Yes. So I'm going to take an example. It's been actually, people didn't comment so much on it, but they didn't realize what it means. So you know that Apple, with their new chips, the M1 chips and M2 chips, they can actually run mobile apps onto your desktop.
Yep.
And I don't know if you realize as well, but Microsoft is moving a lot of their hardware into a more mobile and tablet approach. And they are redesigning Microsoft as well and Windows into ways that they can support mobile application, right, developed for Windows. So what I see a lot at the moment, and I'm not Nostradamus, I don't know if you know Nostradamus, but I'm not like I'm not a visionary of future. I don't dream of the future and the rest, but I recognize certain sign of technologies, right? The consumer world is getting faster and faster, and we are selling more and more mobiles and more application hardware that basically allow you to do things faster and access it wherever you want, right? Which means that you need to have hardware to support this. And this is why our big corporation like Apple, Microsoft, Google are all going that way, because they realize as well that even on desktop, certain of the application that people are using on mobile, they're using it more on mobile, and they would actually use it as much on their desktop, but they end up actually having their mobile. I don't know you, but my mobile is just right there. And sometimes to go faster, I go on my mobile. Why? Because it's more precise and more dedicated. And you see that with the trend in those large companies onto the technology that they are moving, but also onto the kind of emphasis they are doing. It's subtle. You need to watch it over years, right? And it started back in 2020 when we moved to a more integrated ecosystem, right? An experience that is all connected. Google is a perfect example of that. Have you ever, so I don't know if you use Google, but if you use Google and you go to the app, especially my business, if you're Google business, you go to the app and you go to the button of apps, the way Google build its ecosystem is not one software. It's tons and tons of little apps that are part of the work of the work. And the things that Google does extremely well is that they build something, they try it, and if after a few years, no one actually using it, they actually just kill it. Right? They've killed many things lately. Right? Many things that like Google Plus didn't work, they killed. Yeah. They killed things for collaboration as well that were outdated. And I'm pretty sure they're going to kill way more in the few years. And what those large corporations are doing are also buying small companies that are very good at doing one specific things. And I evolved in the world of trading. Bloomberg is a very great example of everybody who knows Bloomberg, they know it's big. But actually, it's actually building. They build one terminal and it's an interface, but it's the connectors to many, many small things and many data sources everywhere, right? And more you'll see this. You'll see actually a bump into add-ons for other products. For example, lately I've seen many of my contacts on LinkedIn and people in my network building add-ons for Google's and selling it, right? Because the business model change as well, right? People don't want to buy for long term anymore, right? They want to buy short term and then change quickly if they are not happy anymore. And that's the same in business. You know, when I used to work in Schlumberger, we used to make contracts. We made a contract with a company in 2010. No, 11 we signed it with a company for 20 years. Today, you say to a company, I want a contract for 20 years. They look at you with big eyes and say, what? It's like, you're crazy, you know? I want 2 years, you know, maximum, or 3 years, but 5, 20, 10 years, because the cost of implementation is very high. So one of the things as well we are going to see and we are seeing is that most and more people want an easy way of integrating into their environment. This is why integration is important. If you don't integrate into an ecosystem, you're going to die on your own. If you are just a niche and you're just like, you're not connected to anything, you're going to die. You see it a lot actually with product management tools. For example, the best, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you know that, but one of the best tools of product management I've known is one of the I've used in Schlumberger, which was Azure Devops. It had everything. You can customize everything, right? When I left, I had to learn Atlassian and Jira, but then, okay, fine. It was fine, but still too cumbersome. I wanted something even simpler, more niche, because I didn't need the whole bells and whistles, but connected well. So I took Clubhouse. And then when you look at the integration of all these tools, they integrate more and more with the design tools. So things are more streamlined. They integrate more with the project management tool, with the deployment tools and so forth. The reality is that if you try to build one single tool that does everything, like an operating system, it's not going to work, right? Most of the companies nowadays, and especially those large companies, they are seeking to have more flexibility. I don't know what's 2030 is going to happen, but the COVID showed us a lot of things. The COVID episode, Kpler is all full remote. We have offices, right? And people can go and rent an office, but everybody works from home. One thing we had to learn is, well, we do more virtual calls, so let's record them so we can actually do something else with it and actually always come back. All of those tools basically have changed because of what happened over the last couple of years. Product management has changed as well, by the way, because when people say we have to be agile and they actually are not, and they don't actually know what agile means beyond, it's a scrum meeting. They actually had to learn to communicate differently and more efficiently, so the developers that they are not sitting beside them, are not sitting with them anymore, can understand what they do. It forced product management, the COVID forced product management to step up our game. And for that, we needed tools different than what we had, right? So this is basically the trends I see. And this is why I say, you're going to see more and more happening into this B2B world, also in B2C, where you're going to have more and more niche things that basically ramp up. And by the way, there is also another thing happening in, being part of various teams and mentoring for startups and venture capital, I see it as well. There is a bubble around funding. There is a lot of funding happening for a lot of startups at the moment. Everyone that has an idea, there is money for it. You have an idea, go and get money, even if you fail, right? Because those venture capital, they know that you have to invest more to basically get to get an outcome, right? To get something out of it. And this is basically what I've seen is that it doesn't really matter if you can't find the concept anymore. Sometimes taking an old concept but making it better actually is more successful than trying to build something brand new. The best tool in the world, the one tool that will never die, right, are actually the tools that Microsoft created. They didn't create it. They used to have a table on the paper, Excel, The concept of it will never die because it's everywhere now. It's a great product. You can do hell a lot with Excel. And trust me, you have people that really, really love Excel, Excel, well, PowerPoint is different. PowerPoint is the enemy of a great product because most people take what they see in their product and paste it in PowerPoint. And a great product that where someone can present something on the product and not on PowerPoint, you are a winner, man. But Excel and Word are the two products that the concept shows that you can't get smaller. Google took Excel and said, I'm going to take the 80% of the things that people really do in Excel and do it into a web, and that would be good enough for most people. But that's not a lot of Excel. That's a tiny bit. But it's good enough for the consumers. There's no need to have bells and whistles. But again, Excel nowadays is not so much it's part of your life. It's probably the most used software in the world.
So given
does that answer your question?
Yeah. So
sure, Nina, that's a lot, Clark.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
No, I think the question I answered the question, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think just a comment from me. I think you share a lot about those very big boys who have a platform who are able to build their ecosystem. But for us, maybe for a lot of the B2B cases, is figuring out how do you integrate into the bigger ecosystem that's in the business world,
Yes.
so you can be
Yeah. Exactly. And that's a challenge. But to be honest, they're opening up more and more. We just have to be cautious onto the people we are building it to. You know, we have to be ethical and we have to be sustainable. So we make sure that we respect the people we build it to and don't forget about them.
Yep. Thank you.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So you mentioned about good concepts never die, right? But there are always disruptions from your competitors. And all these rhythms of product life cycle or whatever you call it would actually be changed, and how you define each phase would be different as well. And maybe some companies would be stuck at particular phase where some others would be much more like doing another thing already, like after 3 years. So how do you see, like in terms of acquiring or retaining talents, how do you communicate like this kind of changes, like how, and which phase your company is in? And it's always difficult to have a crystal ball and project what your company is going to face in front of all the competitions out there, right? So what are the tips to tell to your potential employees that would join your company?
To be honest, for me, it's based on communication. You have to be transparent. You know, you have to be transparent on your team. Yeah, you do not have a crystal ball. You have your gut feelings, but you know, don't underestimate the knowledge of your team. And you can't, in a company, you need to be very clear, even if you're in the top management, the executive teams or the leadership team of the teams, that you do not have all the answers, but maybe some of the people in the company have. And you need to be able to have this culture of sharing and being very open about something and just say, okay, I've seen those trends, you know, what about them? And allow the company and the people to question your decision in a very safe environment. It's about communication. You know, I've worked in a large company where everything was top down. And frankly, sometimes you wonder why this decision was taken. It's not actually what we see, and it's not what the customer needs. Sometimes you know that the customer don't know what they need, so you have to make it alone. But it doesn't make you feel empowered. It doesn't make you feel part of the decision, and it doesn't make you actually work harder for this. So the most important is to make sure that there is a communication. And after that, there is no silver bullet, frankly, Amanda. You have to be listening. And being able to take a hard decision is also the second thing. Is there's no point also spending 6 months trying to analyze the market, because the reality is that you have to try, show it to the market and test it, and then see if there is something. Because nowadays, trying to analyze a market that changed in less than 6 months, it always changes every 6 months. I mean, it's impossible to predict. You have to try. You just have to get your hands on and build something, try, fail, move on. It's okay. At least you know what Edison said is when he invented the bulb. You know, it's like, yeah, I tried 3,000 times, but it was not a failure. I've learned how to not do 3,000 ways to not do a light bulb. It'll be the same way. Yeah, you have to be honest, communicate, and just keep trying. There's no silver bullet, frankly.
Yeah, in the B2B world, there are a lot of all these huge enterprises and tech elephant companies, right? And it's really hard for us to like advocate for a cultural shift to like make sure they embrace changes and empower the team to do experiments and try the failures. What are your tips to convince the management to do
So
all
you
this?
need to be. So there is two ways. There is a way that I tried as well, which is basically make sure that you are very clear on your business case, because it's business to business. You have to have a business case, but you don't need to have like 300 slides for it and understand it. But make sure that they understand the needs, the outcome you are trying to solve. You know, it's a discussion. Generally, it's a discussion, and it's facts. You need to bring facts, either via metrics or via feedback, direct feedback. The other thing is something I've learned in Schlumberger. And pardon Walt Disney or whoever worked in big corporation at the moment. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Because let me tell you something. If you try and fail and they are not aware of it, nothing happened. If you try and fail and they are aware of it, you say, look, we had to try because we had this feedback. And frankly, they're not going to blame you because you are trying to build a product. But if you try and succeed, okay, you can forget the recognition. You are never going to say, okay, she tried that, that's the best, but at least the idea has moved on. The second thing is, one thing that one of my mentor over time taught me was, you don't need to try to do it all and try to make all the team succeed. Focus on to some individuals in some part of the team, make them work well and succeed, and then the rest are going to follow and they're going to watch how they are doing and they're going to start to do the same. And without you realizing it, you've actually started a chain of a reaction chain that's basically going to grow over the team. And the culture, something like a culture of a company is not something set in stone. It's evolving all the time. It's moving. So you need to have this organic growth and let it grow as well, right? And as much as people say, yeah, we listen in big corporation, the rest, I've done it enough to say, look, sometimes you can do as much politics and you can carry on doing as much politics you want. Sometimes you just have to do the work. And it's easier, again, pardon me, but it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. When you know it's right and you know why it's right, because you can justify it. And that's cautious, and that comes with maturity.
I see. Yeah, that's a great tip,
Good.
actually. Yeah. Anyone else have questions for Clark? If not, I will ask one more question. So you mentioned about like nowadays the products are more decentralized, even in the B2B world, right?
Yeah.
Like they no longer committed to a 20-year contract and to get on a huge system and to take on a lot of risk. How do you convince the people who used to believe that you have a huge customer base because your system is well developed, is well mature, and have a lot of success stories and reference clients, and they are well thought, whereas compared to another extreme where you have all these smaller components that integrate with each other, and that these are not something that many B2B companies are used to. And how would you advocate those trends and the benefits of having that paradigm shift?
So this paradigm shift is going to happen not in one day. It's going to happen by loop. So is gonna. So what happens now is that in downturns, in period of downturns, people are gonna basically spend more money in build, take the tools that they need, and then they're gonna come back to integration. Then they're gonna come back, and then slowly, as the technology evolves, things evolve. The best way, and I've done it multiple times when I was in Schlumberger mostly, is and a bit with Kpler and Techstars, but it's to make sure that people and your customers understand their value chain. Draw the value chain with them. You know, what is the value chain, and why are they doing what they are doing at each step? It looks like a tubeway, a tube map, you know, a subway map. If you draw with them this value chain, then you get way more out of it, and you basically make sure that you can explain them where you fit in this value chain, and then how they can be more efficient in their outcome. You know, in a lot of the coaching I do at the moment, it's about really, you know, just making sure that people understand their value chain. You know, it's what's the value they bring and their differentiator within the bigger part of the ecosystem. And if you sit down and explain that to the people, they actually have like big eyes and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of this like this. And you'd be surprised how often that happens, where company startups or large corporation basically realize that. And let's be honest, right? Large corporation, they don't have all the solutions. They need smaller companies and they need smaller product as well. And in their tech stack and software stack, that's what they have. So one of the key things is to make sure that people understand in the company wide that that's the value that they're going to get with that product or another. And sometimes, by the way, just to be clear, you have to take a product for only a short period of time, because you have a specific need, and that product is good for that specific need. And this is why you have to be a bit more flexible. But the key things also to take away from our discussion is that, yes, the technology world and the product world are evolving, but the skill set that are required as well evolves, not only as you as an individual, but it evolves based on the need of the product. So to be a successful product manager, you need to understand where are your strengths and your weaknesses, and then start to apply them into basically find the right product where they can be used. If you found the right fit, then you are going to be very successful. If your skills don't fit the maturity of the product, you are going to be frustrated and you're not going to deliver as much. Right? And it's the same in business when you try to sell a product to a company. If you don't understand what the company needs because you don't know the value chain, then your product is not going to fit in this value chain. See my point?
Yeah, that's really well said, because a lot of companies, or they claim themselves as solution providers, right? But they don't really want to listen to their customers of what business problems they're having or they're encountering, and they're always just wanting to sell you solutions to some unknown problems, which is a little bit weird.
Well, you know, those companies will live for a very short attention. You know, it's just like you need to focus. We have a very cool CFO in Kpler that started not so long time ago, who said to me once, we were in a meeting, said, "Why are we focusing on the wrong competitors?" You know? Like those small companies, frankly, and he's right, and our CSO as well, basically said the same. And I'm also of the opinion, and actually everybody, it's logical, you know, it's when you have those companies trying their hard and do a lot of noise, and they are very present in their marketing and all, it's all noise. If they can't actually turn and take business out of your business, then why do you focus on them? Why do you try to be a small kid when you know what your users want? Focus on your users. Focus on the demand of your users, and let everybody else just do what they want. Keep an eye on them. Just keep them at arm's length, but don't focus on trying to do the same or trying to fight them, because then you're going to lose yourself. And you can't base a strategy of a product onto all those small companies or small products that are rising. You have to be very hard and conscious and take a decision and stick with it. Be flexible in the way that you might actually diverge, but if you believe in your concept and you have proven those concepts and principle or distinctive, and to go with it.
Yeah, the persistence, right?
Persistence, the resilient politician, the resilience is very key.
Great.
Very good.
Thanks so much for your sharing tonight, Clark, your afternoon, actually.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So
I wish you all.
I
wish you all a very good evening and a good night for the Hong Kong-based person or Asia, and for the others that are online and the rest. Thank you very much for watching and having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for teaching us a lot of great insights from your experience. Just for the audience, we are actually celebrating World Product Day today. So Hong Kong is ahead of many other countries and cities in the world in terms of time zone. So you can actually still watch a lot of ProductTank sharings of other cities today by going to the Mind the Product website, and you can see a list of cities participating in this World Product Day. So I believe you will have a very fruitful learning journey, and just keep an eye on our social media, where we will post new updates of upcoming events. And if you are open to volunteer your topics, or you have a good connection of speakers, to come to speak to us, and we want to grow the community together. Okay, so yeah, that's for tonight. Thanks so much everyone for participating. So
thank you. Have a nice evening. Good luck. Bye.
Good day to you, Clark, and good night everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you, everyone.